Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Good to see you all. What we have seen transpire in Los Angeles, California in recent days is shameful. Left-wing radicals waving foreign flags viciously attacked ICE and Border Patrol agents as well as Los Angeles police officers. These criminals injured police, threw rocks at police cars and officers, burned vehicles, shut down freeways, and lobbed Molotov cocktails, all because the Trump administration was removing violent criminal illegal aliens from the city. These attacks were aimed not just at law enforcement, but at American culture and society itself. Rioters burned American flags, chanted "Death to ICE," and spray-painted anti-American slogans on buildings. But President Trump will never allow mob rule to prevail in America. The most basic duty of government is to preserve law and order, and this administration embraces that sacred responsibility. Democrats like Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass shamefully failed to meet their sworn obligations to their citizens. They didn't have the courage to do the right thing and protect law-abiding Californians from rioters. That's why President Trump deployed the National Guard and mobilized Marines to end the chaos and restore law and order. The mob violence is being stomped out. The criminals responsible will be swiftly brought to justice, and the Trump administration's operations to arrest illegal aliens are continuing unabated. When the initial immigration enforcement actions took place on June 6th, Mayor Bass took to social media to say she was deeply angered by what has taken place. Mayor Bass then embarked on one of the most outrageous campaign of lies this country has ever seen from an elected official, blaming President Trump and brave law enforcement officers for the violence. She accused heroic American immigration and customs enforcement officers targeting illegal alien murderers, rapists, and pedophiles of, quote, sowing terror in communities and disrupting basic principles of safety in our city. Around the same time, Governor Newsom claimed that immigration enforcement actions were causing chaos. That's how radical Democrats have become. Their opposition to President Trump has forced them to side with illegal alien criminals in their communities and violent rioters and looters over law enforcement officers who are just doing their jobs. Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom fanned the flames and demonized our brave ICE officers. Instead of defending their city and their state, Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom claimed that in order for the riots and the violence to stop, ICE needed to leave and immigration raids must end. In other words, the position of the Democrat Party is that the federal government is not allowed to enforce our laws and to arrest and deport illegal alien criminals. They're attempting to use a violent mob as a weapon against their own constituents to prevent the enforcement of immigration law. This is deeply un-American and morally reprehensible. President Trump received a clear mandate from voters to reverse the illegal invasion ushered in by Joe Biden's open border and to end the lawlessness represented by Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom's California. President Trump promised to carry out the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and left-wing riots will not deter him in that effort. Sanctuary cities and states will no longer be allowed to shield illegal criminals from deportation. Just take a look at some of the illegal monsters who were taken off the streets in Los Angeles in recent days. A Vietnamese national, a known gang member with a conviction for second-degree murder. A Mexican national with convictions for child molestation who was armed with a dangerous weapon and had previous arrests for robbery and domestic violence. A Filipino national with convictions of rape, assault, burglary, and theft. A Mexican national convicted of statutory rape, narcotics violations, and hit and run. A Nicaraguan national with convictions for domestic violence and hit and run, and a previous arrest for willful cruelty to a child. And an illegal alien from Mexico who was arrested after allegedly throwing a Molotov cocktail at law enforcement officers during the Paramount riots on Saturday. He is now being charged with attempted murder. Law-abiding American citizens do not want these public safety threats living in their communities, no matter what Democrats like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom may claim. And let this be an unequivocal message to left-wing radicals in other parts of the country who are thinking about copycatting the violence in an effort to stop this administration's mass deportation efforts. You will not succeed. Any lawlessness will only strengthen this president's resolve to defend the majority of Americans who want to live their lives peacefully, free from the fear of violent, criminal, illegal aliens. As President Trump said, order will be maintained and illegal aliens will be expelled from our country. In economic news, the latest Consumer Price Index inflation report came in today below expectations again. Since President Trump took office, inflation has come in below economics expectations every single month. Core inflation held steady and remains at the lowest level since March of 2021. Wage growth remains strong. The average private sector worker is on track to see their real earnings increase by around $1,200 adjusted for inflation. And prices continue to fall for everyday Americans. Energy prices fell from April to May. Gasoline has fallen each month since President Trump took office, down 12% over the past year. And prices for meat, poultry, eggs, and fish are all down from April to May as well. Under President Trump's strong leadership, America is beating Joe Biden's record-high inflation crisis. And once the One Big Beautiful Bill passes, our economy will boom like never before. This bill is the largest tax cut for middle-class Americans in history. The One Big Beautiful Bill gives a 15% tax cut to working Americans and families. We'll see increased take-home pay of $10,000 per year. The One Big Beautiful Bill expands the child tax credit to $2,500 for more than 40 million American families with children. And the One Big Beautiful Bill cuts taxes for overtime workers, saving them nearly $2,000 per year, and ends taxes on tips, saving tipped workers nearly $2,000 per year as well. All of these provisions are broadly popular with an overwhelming support from the American people. We need Republicans in Congress to finish the job and send the One Big Beautiful Bill back to President Trump's desk for his signature as soon as possible. With that, we'll get to questions. I'm sure you have many of them today. Here in our new media seat is Elizabeth Mitchell, the White House correspondent for the Daily Signal, who's not afforded a seat in this room, but today she is. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I have two questions, if that's okay. First, a few Republicans on Capitol Hill are suggesting that President Trump scale back deportations, even as ICE is reportedly gearing up for raids in 5 more Democrat-led areas. Would anything dissuade President Trump, and would he consider sending in Marines if anti-ICE violence occurs in these cities?
Well, I think I may have just answered both of your questions with my opening monologue. The Trump administration is going to continue the mass deportation effort that the president promised the American public. Many of you were at those rallies in cities and communities across the country when the president spoke about his commitment to removing violent illegal criminals and anyone who has broken our nation's immigration laws from American communities. And God bless our ICE and Border Patrol who are working hard on that effort. This administration is going to continue that. And it's part of the reason we do need the One Big Beautiful Bill to pass as well, may I add, because the bill provides funding to hire more ICE agents and Border Patrol agents, more personnel on the ground to conduct this important public safety work.
Thank you. And on another topic, President Trump has indicated that aides to former President Biden who used the auto pen to sign major orders and pardons should be investigated for potential crimes. Does he think that Biden allowing, or at least being negligently unaware of this activity, was an impeachable offense?
I haven't heard the president address whether it's an impeachable offense, but it could perhaps be a criminal offense, especially on behalf of staffers who may have been utilizing the president's signature without his authority or consent. I understand that Republicans on the Hill are moving in the right direction to call attention to this and to bring in some former White House staffers who clearly knew more than they ever shared and never addressed with the American public. And so we look forward to seeing where this investigation continues, and I know the Department of Justice is also looking into the matter as well. Alex, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Caroline. Thank you. You mentioned foreign flags being blown during these protests. There are protest activities being organized for this weekend. Part of it are Democrats saying they want to reclaim the American flag. It's also being titled No King's Day. Does the president see himself as a king, and does the White House expect to see American flags being flown during these protests this weekend?
The president views himself as the president of the United States of America. This is a constitutional republic, and we want to see all of our citizens be proud of the country in which they are given the privilege and the blessing to live. And I think that those images of foreign flags being waved with, by illegal criminals and by violent rioters in the face of cars blowing up and of flames in the city. I have photos of that here to show you with this violence and destruction that occurred is an image that Governor Gavin Newsom owns. This is his city, and President Trump saw these images, and he said that is not going to be accepted or tolerated, and hence why he deployed the National Guard and United States Marines who have helped to quell that violence.
If I can ask another.
Sure.
If the president does end up deploying any National Guard members, perhaps Marines, to blue states, would he be in contact with the governors prior to this? Would it be necessary?
Well, President Trump was in contact with Governor Gavin Newsom despite some of the claims he's made in the last couple of days. The president called the governor on Friday evening and told him to let law enforcement in California do their jobs. And the Los Angeles Police Department, by the way, are fantastic people. They are trying to do the work that they've so bravely signed up to do, to enforce the law. But they have been kneecapped by incompetent Democrat policies and Democrat politicians who do not allow their local law enforcement to correspond and coordinate with federal immigration authorities. And so the president gave Gavin Newsom a warning and said, get it together. 24 hours later, we saw more images like this. We heard about Border Patrol agents who were being the target of rocks. These illegal criminals were throwing rocks at our Border Patrol and ICE agents, and so the president made the decision to federalize California's National Guard. Stephanie.
Thank you. Two questions on the China trade deal, if I may.
Sure.
First, will the president formally sign the trade deal, and if so, when? Secretary Lutnick sort of alluded to the fact that it might be in a couple of days, but I'm curious if there's anything more specific to read out.
Sure. Well, I do have more specifics for you. I spoke to the president about this. He spoke to his trade team, who did a fantastic job negotiating this on behalf of the United States and meeting with their Chinese counterparts. The president is talking to them about the details of it now. But what the president heard, he liked. China has agreed to open their markets to the United States separately of this deal. And when it comes to this deal, we're going back to the terms that were agreed upon in Geneva for the release of some of those critical minerals and the magnets from China to the United States. And we have agreed to fully comply with the Geneva Agreement as well. So the president is reviewing the details of that with his trade team now, and you'll hear more from him, I'm sure.
And then the second question, on tariffs, Secretary Lutnick suggested that the tariffs would remain unchanged with China. I'm wondering if there's any room for them to negotiate even lower, or if this is the floor.
I won't get ahead of any further negotiations. We're in a great place right now, and I would add that this is the result of a lot of hard work from the president and his team, and the president has a good and respectful relationship with President Xi, and as you know, they had a direct conversation which led to this success that the president announced on Truth Social this morning. JJ.
On North Korea, has the president tried to resume dialogue with Kim Jong-un? There's some reporting that the president sent a letter and tried to give it to Kim Jong-un through some North Korean diplomats through the UN, and they declined to take it and send it to Kim Jong-un.
The president remains receptive to correspondence with Kim Jong-un, and he'd like to see the progress that was made at that summit in Singapore, which I know you covered in 2018 during his first term. As for specific correspondence, I'll leave that to the president to answer. Sure.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thanks. Back to the trade deal negotiations with China. Jimmy Lai, as you know, is a pro-democracy advocate, Catholic, sitting in solitary confinement in Hong Kong as we speak. His family believes he may be close to death. Did his name come up, Jimmy Lai's name come up in these negotiations with China?
Not to my knowledge. I understand the negotiations were very much focused on our trade and economic relationship with China.
Does the president believe he can free Jimmy Lai from prison?
I'll check with the president. It's certainly an important issue, and I'll get back to you.
Thanks, Caroline. The president said yesterday that paid insurrectionists were behind or involved in the protests in Los Angeles. Does the White House have any more details about who they believe is paying these protesters?
The president spoke about this last night when he returned from Fort Bragg, because frankly the president has a lot of common sense. And if you look at some of the imagery that we ever received from the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and law enforcement who are on the ground, you will see boxes and boxes of very professionalized masks and rioting equipment being dropped off for these protesters. So it's a good question the president is raising, and one we are looking into, about who is funding these insurrectionists and these rioters and these protesters and these illegal criminals. And I have updates for you on the numbers, by the way. Since June 6th, there have been 330 illegal aliens that have been arrested as part of these riots in Los Angeles. 113 of those illegal aliens had prior criminal convictions. And overall, and this includes arrests of American citizens, there's been 157 people arrested for assault and obstruction-related charges, including the attempted murder of a police officer with a Molotov cocktail. So who is funding these illegal aliens who are coming in with this very professional riot gear? It's a question everyone in this room who cares about truth should be asking. And we encourage your help in trying to get to the bottom of that question. Indina.
Thank you, Caroline. About Elon Musk, he issued an apology this morning. Has the president accepted the apology, or does he think it's too little too late?
The president acknowledged the statement that Elon put out this morning, and he is appreciative of it, and we are continuing to focus on the business of the American people.
And has the administration started a review of Musk's government contracts, something that the president said he's considering?
What do you mean by that?
Has the administration started a review of the contracts that Musk and his companies currently have?
No efforts have been made on that front as far as I'm aware.
And just one more, if I may, on just everything sort of we've seen so far with the president's response to the LA protests. There is criticism that seems to suggest that the president responded the way he did because it was a deliberate, calculated attempt to sort of shift focus away from his feud with Musk. How would you respond to that?
That the president responded to the LA riots, condemning the violence to
from Musk.
That's an incredibly disingenuous attack. The president saw images of Border Patrol and ICE agents being hailed with rocks and Molotov cocktails. He saw vehicles being burned to the ground with illegal aliens flying foreign flags, and that's what prompted the president to have this response that has clearly worked, because last night in Los Angeles you didn't see many of those images. And I would add the governor and the mayor need to actually do more. I know Gavin Newsom had a big address to the nation last night. I guess he thought that's what it was for maybe his future political ambitions, but he spoke a lot of words. We haven't seen action. California has been a mess for years because of the incompetence of Gavin Newsom, so the president was responding to that only. Caitlin.
Caroline, 2 questions for you.
Sure.
Over the weekend, Secretary Nome sent a memo to the Pentagon asking Secretary Hegseth to have and direct the military that's on the ground in LA to arrest and detain what she said were lawbreakers. Is the president okay with that? And under what authority would the members of the military be able to arrest people inside the United States?
I can't speak for a letter that came from the Department of Homeland Security. I can't speak for the president and what's currently happening on the ground now. And as you know, the president federalized the National Guard under U.S. Code 10, which he has the authority to do. And our United States Marines and the National Guardsmen and women who are on the ground right now are helping to create a peaceful environment for ICE and Border Patrol, who were being, again, hailed with rocks, who were being violently and viciously attacked. They needed reinforcements, and so our United States Marines who are on the ground are providing those reinforcements to ensure the environment is peaceful so that these raids and deportations can continue.
But he realizes they can't actually arrest people unless he invokes the Insurrection Act, which, I mean, seemingly was not something that was in Secretary Nome's memo, a clear distinction she did not make there.
Again, you're trying to conflate a letter that was sent to the Department of Homeland Security to the president's legal authority. The president understands the legal authority that he invoked, and that's the current situation right now.
When it comes to federalizing the National Guard, what is the specific criteria that the president is using for when he's deciding to do that, and in which states?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday. He wants to see an end to the chaos and the violence. He doesn't want to see law enforcement officers being attacked. He wants to see peace. He wants law-abiding Californians to be able to bring their kids to school, to be able to go to work without seeing this violence in the streets. That's what the president's hoping for, and that's why he's taken this action. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. 2 questions on 2 separate topics. One has to do with the military parade taking place here in Washington this weekend. There's a lot of security around the White House complex, around the Capitol complex, even along the tidal basin. Is that just proactive? Are you expecting anything in particular in terms of unrest like we've seen in Los Angeles?
These are proactive security measures to protect those marching in the parade, many of whom will be veterans and our brave men and women in uniform and Gold Star families. There's going to be military families from around the country who are flying into this parade. And of course, it's to protect the spectators who will be enjoying this incredibly patriotic show on Saturday, and I hope you all join us there.
And then secondly, Secretary Pete Hegseth testified on the Senate side of the Capitol today,
Yes.
And he was asked about America's, the administration's view of Vladimir Putin's intentions. And specifically, it was asked whether or not his intentions go beyond, his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine. When that question was posed to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane replied that he does believe that his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine, but Secretary Hegseth says it's not clear at this point. How does the president view this issue?
The president has spoken on this. He said, as he calls it, he believes Ukraine was always the apple of Putin's eye. And he made it very clear to Putin in his first term not to invade Ukraine. Putin didn't invade Ukraine because of President Trump's peace through strength foreign policy agenda and the effective deterrence policies that he implemented in the first term. Unfortunately, because of the weakness and incompetence of the previous administration, Vladimir Putin made the decision to invade Ukraine, and now we have this brutal war which the president is working very hard to end. Jasmine.
Thanks so much, Caroline. The president warned that any protests on Saturday would be met with force. Can you clarify what kind of protest President Trump does support or find acceptable?
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He supports the right of Americans to make their voices heard. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers who are simply trying to do their job. It's very clear for the president what he supports and what he does not. Unfortunately for Democrats, that line has not been made clear, and they've allowed this unrest and this violence to continue, and the president has had to step in.
What question? So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the military parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question. Raquel.
Thank you so much, Caroline.
Raquel, and then I can go to you, Francis. Go.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I have two questions. One about Israel. Yesterday, the U.S. ambassador to Israel said the U.S. no longer is pursuing the goal of an independent Palestinian state. Can you confirm that the president is no longer supporting a two-state solution? And is President Trump considering diplomatic action against countries who takes action against Israel during next week's UN conference?
Right now, the president views the situation in Israel and Gaza as deeply unfortunate and needing to end. And the president is realistic about the current state of affairs in this region of the world. And that's why the president has said the number one focus and priority of the administration is to release all of the hostages from Gaza and to end this conflict as soon as possible. The administration is still pushing very hard for the release of all the hostages. And as for what happens next, clearly Gaza is an uninhabitable place. It needs to be rebuilt with the help of our Arab partners, and the president wants to see that happen as well. Take a couple
Just
more.
one on the G7 engagement. President Trump is traveling there on Sunday. Other presidents beyond the G7 leaders are also going. President Lula from Brazil, President Sheinbaum from Mexico, and President Zelensky from Ukraine are also going. Do you have confirmation if President Trump is meeting any other leaders on the sideline of the G7?
Yes.
To know about the Lula engagement in Lula.
I can confirm there will be quite a few bilateral meetings between the president and other foreign leaders. The White House is still working very hard to finalize that schedule, and we will provide that for you as soon as we have it. Great.
Thanks, Caroline. Just back to the China trade deal, can you talk about the status of the export controls that the U.S. imposed? Are those no longer being imposed?
We are fully complying with the Geneva Agreement. Go ahead. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. One foreign question for you and one domestic. The foreign, the president, of course, has said he would lift sanctions on Syria. Is there an executive order coming along soon to go do that? And is the president planning to try to get involved in any kind of a peace agreement between Israel and Syria that would disengage those two?
To the best of my knowledge, the Treasury Department took action after the president made that announcement in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. And then on the domestic side, you were just asked about the First Amendment rights issues. In the president's comments yesterday, though, he just said protesters would be strongly dealt with. In your list before, you referred to insurrectionists, rioters, and protesters together. Obviously, they're quite different from your earlier answer. I'm struck by the fact that the president has not at any point said the most important thing here is to protect the First Amendment rights of peaceful protesters. So I'm wondering, where in his hierarchy of interests does he place that? Is the First Amendment protection the most important? Is stopping violence most important? Why is he not out saying all peaceful protesters will be protected?
I think two things can be important at the same time. And the president, as I just answered, supports the right of Americans to peacefully protest. He supports the First Amendment. But that is not the majority of the behavior that we have seen taking place in Los Angeles. We have seen mobs of violent rioters and agitators assaulting law enforcement officers, assaulting our federal immigration authorities. And we have seen, as I said, this goes back to what this administration is trying to do and accomplish, and that's enforcing law and order in our nation's communities. And it's removing public safety threats from communities in Los Angeles.
You're saying the majority have not been peaceful, the majority have been violent.
I just read for you the arrest numbers. We've arrested nearly 400 illegal aliens alone, just illegal aliens who have been arrested in these riots since June 6th, since they began.
Thousands of people on the streets.
Yeah, and we've had hundreds of people who have assaulted law enforcement officers. Are you saying that that's that's appropriate behavior?
No,
Are you
no,
saying
I'm not
that
saying
the
that at all.
president
I'm
shouldn't
just
take
trying
action?
to figure out.
The Democrat governor and the Democrat mayor of Los Angeles have failed their citizens. And the majority of Americans, the majority of Californians do not want to see law enforcement officers being assaulted in the streets. And thankfully, the president took action and stepped in to protect our federal law enforcement agents, to protect federal buildings, to protect the federal mission of deporting illegal criminals off of our streets. And that mission will continue every day as far as we're concerned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Caroline.